I have an interesting video for you today, my friends. This is Tony. Hope you're all doing well. We're going to talk about a number of things. We're going to talk about what has happened to our society, my friends, how things have changed so much financially and also spiritually around us. And I'm going to sort of show you a number of viral stories of recent and how it ties into all this history. And it shows you how the devil has been essentially moving society and doing things. That's what we're going to do in this video, my friends. And trust me, it's well worth it. Like I said, we're going to get into all this and much more. Let's start with this clip from Richard Dawkins. I'm sure you've heard of Richard Dawkins, right? Famous atheist from Great Britain. And by the way, all this history we're going to talk about, King Arthur, Merlin, although they were from Wales, we're talking Ireland and England, Great Britain, right? You got England, Ireland. We also have John Dee, who was a famous mathematician, astronomer, and also a magician. Okay, he's also from the same area, from the late 1500s. We'll get into that. And we're even going to get into the King James and all that, much more. It's pretty amazing. So they're all from the same area. They're all from Britain. And this is where a lot of this is going to be, my friends. Let's play this real quick and you'll see what I'm getting at. This is a recent viral clip of Richard Dawkins saying something that no one expected. All right?
Thank you.
And what would be your Easter message? I mean, I've said a few things. What would you tell the nation?
Well, I must say I was slightly horrified to hear that Ramadan is being promoted instead. I do think that we are culturally a Christian country. I call myself a cultural Christian. I'm not a believer.
He says there he's culturally a believer, but he's not an actual believer. And then he goes on to say some rather bizarre things that completely contradict his own paradigm. He goes and says, I am glad to see that less people are believing. But at the same time, I like Christmas carols, I like hymns, I like everyone being around me sort of culturally a believer, but he doesn't want people to believe. You see how that is pretty contradictory? And I think it comes back to, he's like, whoa, what's going on here? My country is really changing and I don't like the direction it's going. Guess what, Richard? You're the one that caused it. You're the one that's been preaching for decades. Atheism. And now you've gotten the result of your viewpoint. Your viewpoint didn't make Star Trek some sort of in the future utopia where everybody's nice to each other and we work together for science and reason. It didn't work like that, did it? No, it didn't. Instead, something else happened. Something else came into your country with obviously a different religion, right? That started to come in. They started changing their culture, their beliefs. Now you have stories like this here where if you got a booth handing out, their book, the Quran, completely fine, no problem. But if you're out there giving out the other book from another religion, we're talking the scriptures, the Bible, if you give that out, oh, that's a problem. Might have some police at your door. That's what's going on in their country now. And we're seeing this actually in a number of countries of recent. It's not just that one. We saw, of course, what happened about a month ago where there was marching everywhere. And they're like, did you put something on Facebook? They're going into grandma's house over in Yorkshire or whatever, London or something, and breaking down the door and putting her in handcuffs. Grandma wrote something again online. What's wrong with you, Grandma? Of course, at the same time, letting the actual criminals who've done real thefts and stuff like that out of prison so they can put Grandma in there. That's what's been going on over in the UK over the last recent. Then, of course, you have this story with Brazil. This also happened. This is like today or yesterday. Massive group of people out here. Why? They want to be able to speak, of course, freely. They want to say what they want to say on, various websites. And now their new leadership is saying that you can no longer go on websites like Twitter. You can't say what you want. And if you do, you will be fined every day for it. Thousands of dollars. This is what they're saying. So, of course, a lot of people are not happy about that. That's happening in Brazil. And if you remember, during the Olympics, there was 2 contestants in the Olympics, both of them from Brazil, that were trying to stand for what, of course, they believed in. One was a surfer. He had the statue, Christ the Redeemer statue, on his surfboard. They told him to remove it. And then there's another lady from Brazil, a skateboarder, and they told her that she couldn't speak about her, faith. And so she instead sign languaged it, right? So you see this, you can't say that that's no coincidence. That was just, that was a coincidence that you have these two things happening in Brazil right in tandem, right in a row. Seems rather curious, right? So what I'm saying is that if you look and you really pay attention, you can see how the devil is working around you. And you can see sort of his patterns and what he's doing so that you can counter him. Right? And what's interesting about this is, how did the church get formed the way it is? And this is actually really important. You have basically two main groups these days. Well, actually, technically you have probably three main groups, but so you have like sort of the more orthodox type of church, but tends to be kind of rejecting certain things. Then you have these other two groups, which are basically the charismatic Pentecostal types and sort of the Calvinist cessation types. Those are the two groups you have. Now, this actually will play into what we're going to be talking about, this history in England, Great Britain, and how it comes into what we see today. So, of course, you have these two different groups, the sort of Pentecost, or the cessationists and the Pentecostals, the Calvinists and the Pentecostals sort of type groups, right? Now, this, I believe, was actually set up this way by the devil. Now, this might sound crazy to you, but it actually is true if you start looking into this. So what's going on is you have this one man named John Dee. Okay, let's get over to this guy. Now, John Dee was from around the late 1500s. He was a mathematician, astronomer, teacher, and occultist as well, as they call it. Now, it's very interesting they say the word occultist, because what really happened here was that the church actually was very much doing things like magic, and they were doing miracles. Okay, you can see it in all these medieval, of course, writings and things like that. Now, when I say that, a lot of believers are like, "Oh, magic's bad." This is how they usually think. But let me point out something that's in the scriptures that a lot of people just completely ignore. That's right there for you to see. Okay, when the King of Kings was born, who went and visited him? Magi. What are magi? They are magicians. They are astronomers, just like this John Dee. The exact same type of person went to see his birth 2,000 years ago. The exact same kind of person. Who looked at the stars, who was a mathematician, astronomer, etc., also an alchemist or occultist, as they would call it. You remember, the Magi were of the school that Daniel started. He was able to interpret dreams, to look at the stars, to understand things like this, right? And now today, what do they tell you? Well, nobody knows this stuff anymore, do they? Do you see anybody like John Dee around? John Dee would actually communicate. He would actually have angels in front of him telling him stuff and communicating things to him. You don't see anybody doing that stuff anymore, do you? Probably not. You don't see anybody like these magi doing things like that, looking at the stars. And, well, technically I do it a little bit, but not really. I mean, I actually figure out things in the stars myself. But you know what I'm saying? Like, you don't see this anywhere. This is not mainstream at all, right? What do you see today? You see two groups. You see sort of like the charismatic, and you see the Calvinists. Now, the charismatic believe in the spiritual gifts, but they don't really get into these ancient texts. They don't really study so much depth, the scriptures or any of that stuff. Then you got the Calvinists, which is supposed to be sort of the science and reason side. So you have sort of the more emotion and spiritual side, and then you got more of the science reason side, right? Now, the Calvinists, a lot of them are cessationists. Now, cessationists, like for instance, John MacArthur is a very famous cessationist. What are cessationists? They don't believe there's any miracles anymore, like zero. Like, you can't do any miraculous stuff at all, period, zip, zilch. And then they look at the charismatics and they see them doing weird stuff like shaking, like doing all this stuff. And they say, look, see, that doesn't look right. And then everybody's like, well, yeah, you're right. It does kind of look weird. It is strange that they're flopping around like a fish on the ground. I don't think I want to be a part of that, right? So then that must mean that John MacArthur's correct. No, actually he isn't. It's like Coke and Pepsi. The devil's like, do you like Coke or you like Pepsi? You got only those two choices. Both are wrong, but those are the only two choices. So this is how the devil set it up. He set it up so that you only can choose from two wrong sides. That's the entire point, so that you can never grow in full faith. That's basically how he set it up. Now, what did he do? He actually, and I covered this on my other channel, my main channel, God Rules. Basically what happened is you had people like John Dee, you had Merlin the magician. They were actually working in these areas, kind of like the prophet Daniel did and the school he set up, right? And also Enoch, by the way. This guy was actually considered a modern day Enoch in his time. Because remember, Enoch communicated and actually was a sort of a intermediary for these angels that fell and God. Now, he was sort of dealing with their judgment. He was like, look, what do you think? This is their case. What do you think, Yahweh? And he's like, no, I don't accept that. They're banished, right? This is basically what he said if you read the book of Enoch. But he was actually working in the spiritual realm, doing things sort of in this kind of light, right? Now, so today you don't ever see any of this stuff. So what did the devil do? So he basically got this stuff condemned. How did he get this stuff condemned? The Vatican. So actually at first the Pope actually liked this guy, John Dee. Actually the Pope had him come by and do stuff and bring these angels forth and talk to him and figure stuff out. And he thought it was really interesting and wow, that's cool and all that. But then eventually they're like, wait a second. We like controlling stuff here at the Vatican, and we don't like other people doing stuff we can't control. So we're going to just condemn this. Okay, and this is basically how the Vatican works with a lot of stuff. And I've talked about this over the years numerous times. Even the afterlife, if you start looking into the ancient languages in Scripture, you start comparing it to the Pharisees' writings. The Pharisees spoke in Greek and wrote in Greek around the time of Christ. And they would write stuff like Timorian Aietos, that the afterlife was eternal torment, Timorian Aietos. And actually, if you look at Jesus' words, he said Kolassos Aianos, which isn't the same as Timorian Aietos. Timorian Aietos means literal eternal torment. Okay? Kolassos Aianos is more like long period of time discipline. A little bit different sounding. You see what I mean? Not the same thing. One's literally eternity. The other one's long period of time, lifespan, age, whatever you want to call it. And it's a discipline, not a literal, like really bad thing, right? Where it actually had some sort of benefit to it or something. So a lot of people don't even know any of this stuff. They don't look into this stuff. But my point is that the Pharisees were trying to stop the King of Kings when he was on earth, right? They were the religious authorities. Now today it's the Vatican's the religious authority. We don't like what you're doing. We define what's a miracle and what's not. By the way, the Vatican recently came out doing exactly that. They recently came out with new rules. Let me go look it up. This is hilarious. This actually relates to, I didn't even think about this. Vatican comes out with new rules for miracles. This literally happened recently. Yeah, here we go. Vatican is cracking down on miracles. Check this out. The Vatican is cracking down. This is what I'm talking about. So at first they liked John Dee. The Pope liked him. He was amused by what he could do. All that's kind of cool. But then eventually they're like, wait a second. We're in charge. This is just some dude doing stuff we can't control. We don't like that. So let's just get rid of it. Just like they do today. This is literally a couple months ago. The Vatican is cracking down on miracles. They're the ones that decide what's a miracle and what's not. See how that works? So when they can't control it, they don't like it. And then when I was talking about this eternal torment, that was their means of control of people. There was actually multiple schools of theology back then. There was 5 schools of theology. They shut down, or no, there were 6 schools of theology. They shut down 5 of them and only kept the one they liked open. Again, control. They liked the idea of people being scared of doing wrong. And then they were able to sell indulgences, right? Oh, you're scared of going to hell? Oh, you can buy this over here. It's just kind of like the prosperity preacher, like give me money and God will give it back. It's the same exact ridiculous scam, right? So you see kind of what I was trying to get at with regards to that. The afterlife is a little bit more complex than the common minister tells you. If you look at the ancient languages, there's actually multiple different places you can go. There's Tartarus, there's Gehenna. I mean, Paradisos, which was actually upper levels Hades, and then you got lower levels Hades. It's not like the simplistic thing like you're commonly taught. Now, what's interesting, of course, like I said, the same as with this, with these concepts of the magi or magic, is what the devil did is he actually got the church to condemn magic so that the church no longer used it. And then what he did is he siphoned all the knowledge out of there into the occult. And that's what Crowley used. Now, this is really mind-blowing when you start looking into this, because who do you think Aleister Crowley studied? This man here. And who is this man? This man was baptized into the church. He's a believer. Why would Crowley study his works? He's getting it from the church. You see what I mean? Well, I thought Crowley was against it. He is. He uses it for his own selfish purposes. You see how that works? He siphons out all this knowledge. The church blocks it from being used on its side because the devil's controlling the church in some places. I've mentioned before, the devil's in the church and outside the church. So the devil gets into the hierarchy of the church, the leadership, just like when the King of Kings walked the earth, the religious leaders were against him. Okay? See, that's a good way for the devil to hide. Put on a minister suit and pretend to be a minister. It works every time. Everyone just believes him for some reason. So you get into the church, you block the church from doing it anymore, you siphon all the knowledge over to the occult, and you use it for his purposes, the devil. That's how he did it. So, and Crowley studied this stuff. Now it gets more deep. It gets crazy. So how did Crowley become the man he is? It's because of his mother. What was his mother? She is very religious. What was she a part of? She was part of the Plymouth Brethren. Where did the Plymouth Brethren come from? Oh, you're going to like this. You got to look into the stuff in depth to figure it all out. So the Plymouth Brethren came from a man named John Darby. Let me show you this. We'll go backwards on this. John Nelson Darby. This man is sort of the how do you say it? It's kind of like the godfather of modern day church theology. We're talking about Left Behind series. You know, the whole concept of cessationism, Left Behind, just beam me up, Scotty. And there's nothing wrong with believing that you will be beamed up to God. I believe it will happen. But what it is it's sort of a mindset. It's a mentality. Look, everything's going to hell. Whatever, just beam me out of here kind of attitude, right? Like, don't even try to fix it. That's the mindset the devil wants you to have. The devil wants you to have a defeated mindset. You already were defeated down here. Just beam me out of here. See what I mean? Of course, they don't think of it as being defeated. They think of it as we win because we're beamed out of here, and then he comes back and does everything. But this whole mindset, guess who funded this man? This is the man who started the Plymouth Brethren. Let me show you this. Plymouth Brethren. You see this Plymouth Brethren? John Darby started this. Guess where Aleister Crowley grew up in? He grew up in a Plymouth Brethren community. So Aleister came from literally something Darby created. Now, where did Darby get his funding? He got it from the Roth, of course, Childs. I'm sure you've heard of them before. Schofield Bible, you've heard of that? Schofield was a student of John Darby. They were both funded by the Roth, of course, Child group. Now, I'm sure I don't need to explain to you who he is, but basically what I'm telling you is this whole Left Behind theology comes from the Roth, of course, Childs, and no one seems to know that. Okay? That's where it came from. That's all. And now let's go look at Crowley. Where did he grow up? Plymouth Brethren. His mother was a religious woman, super religious woman, that was part of this group that was funded by the Roth, of course, Childs. She would call her son Aleister the devil all the time. And eventually Alistair believed it. He's like, well, maybe I am the devil. Maybe I am. And that's when he started getting into the occult. And who did he study? Again, he went back to what was cut off by the church, magic from John Dee, and he siphoned it off from the church to use for bad, of course, purposes. That's where all this knowledge came from. No one knows this. It's kind of funny, actually. So this, I think you see what I'm getting at. So the devil blocked the church from using it, and then used it on for his own purposes. See how that works? It's all there. You can see it. Just look at the history. It's all there. And so, like I said, we're going to get into actually more stuff. We're going to talk about Rick Joyner, a lot of this leadership around us. John MacArthur, I'm going to get into something about him because I didn't get into it in the other video. And it's pretty mind-blowing when you hear it because a lot of people don't know about it. But it's all there. You can see it. Okay, it comes back to the retreats and their camps. Where they go. Where do they go? Who funds it? How about John MacArthur's relatives? Do you know what? One of them was a 33rd, degree something. I think you know what I'm referring to. Actually, two of his relatives. His grandfather, one of his uncles, I think it was. But of course, he's against it. He would never be a part of that stuff. Although, he has a camp for students that actually practice stuff from it. We'll get into that. But he's not part of it, of course. Well, he has a camp that does it. Yeah, we'll get into that. And actually a lot more. First, though, I got to mention, look, we've seen what's going on around us, friends. We've seen all this going on with Dollar General. Now, literally closing locations. We have even, believe it or not, Goodwill stores closing locations. We've seen our society changing economically, financially, also spiritually around us. They're shuttering stores of Goodwill. I mean, they get their product for free. It's ridiculous. They get their product for free and they still can't even afford to stay in business because everyone is pretty much broke. This comes back to who is behind all this. We've talked about the Roth, of course, Childs already. These families up there, at the top, are owning everything. And they're the ones getting you to think certain ways, to be certain places. We talked about Richard Dawkins here, a walking contradiction, basically telling you not to believe, but then he wants to have all the benefits of people believing around him. Our society is grounded on this. Our foundation, you remove the foundation, what happens? It all crumbles, and we're seeing it happen in real time around us. That's why it's wise to be prepared for what's coming, of course, next, my friends. We've seen all the stuff happening around us. There could be a world WAR, we don't know. There could be power, of course, outages. We've seen all the stuff going on around us, my friends. It's wise to be prepared. Food supply, 25-year shelf life. Link is in the description. Mega 3-month food supply package. More calories per day than the old package. $750, $300 off. Link is in the description for that. Also, this book here, The Lost Ways, how your great-great-grandfather lived without electricity, how to build a cellar, do things around the house like they did in the good old days, hundreds of pages illustrated. The fact of the matter is, you're going to need this book before something happens. Get the printed version. It's like $37 plus shipping. Link is in the description. Of course, also gold and silver. I've already shown you guys the graphs in previous videos that we're clearly going to have a stock market crash very soon. All the data shows it. If you look at the yield curve, looking at the 10-year versus the 2-year treasury, and you see it that it's uninverting for the 7th time in 50 years. Every single time it uninverts, it becomes a stock market crash every single time. And the longest it goes before it happens usually is about at most a year. Usually it's only a couple months. So anywhere from now until a year from now, we're going to have a stock market crash. And there was only one time in the last 50 years out of the 7 times where it took like a year to do it. Usually it's like within 2 months. So we're very close to a stock market crash, my friends. And if it does crash, the dollar will likely crash with it. It's wise to have gold and silver. Silver is probably the best bet because it's underpriced right now. And it will go through the roof when this occurs. It will go through the roof. You're going to definitely want to get it before that happens. Link is in the description. Also, my website, GR Videos. Lots of my videos, deep dives into topics like this here. Over there, link is in the description. $4.95 a month. First month is free. let's get back to the video. So we have a ton to talk about. I mentioned that a lot of the leadership today are in these two branches that were created essentially by the devil. The way I look at it is that they were guided that way. They were guided to being either miraculous but not really knowing what they're doing, not reading the scriptures, not really understanding any of it, or don't believe in the miraculous at all and be science logic kind of route, which is the Calvinist. So you got these two routes that the devil wants you to take. Both of them keep you young in the faith. You never get to go farther because you're stuck in this paradigm that was created for you. Okay? Now, of course, the leadership behind these paradigms also is very, very what I would call suspect. You have people like Rick Joyner here, who, of course, is on the charismatic side. Very interesting looking into him. There was a story I talked about on my other channel. I don't know if it's true, but there is a part that is true, okay, where he has his retreats. He went over with Brian Welch, which is the guy from, what is he from? He's from Slipknot or whatever, right? Isn't that Slipknot? Okay, right here. This guy right here. This is Slipknot, right? I can't even remember the name of the group. Korn, not Slipknot, Korn. I don't listen to that anyway, so I don't know. He's of the band Korn, okay? So this guy's a believer, right? But he went out with Rick Joyner on one of these retreats to this place. I remember seeing, it was back some years ago. Yeah, here we go. What's this Facebook? What is this? Yeah, this might have been it. Is this it? This is it. I think this is it here, 2015. Had a great time with Brian Welch, formerly with Korn, Todd, and Rick Joyner here too. I think this is Rick Joyner right here. Mouse, get on the screen. This is Rick Joyner right here. This is where they had their retreat up in the mountain. It's in this area where all these certain families live. We're talking rich dudes that are like part of certain things. You know what I'm talking about? I don't want to say the words. Okay. Kind of like the Rothschild type of families. Okay. You get what I'm saying? Those kind of people. They have the retreat there. And of course, there's a story. I don't know if I want to tell the story. I said it in the other video, but basically, and we don't know if this is true or not, but supposedly his maid or woman, house cleaner, saw one of these letters from some of the people living in this area of this retreat, sent to Rick Joyner to join them at some sort of party. And this party mentions about a very famous word that I can't say. It clearly refers to these type of groups in a ritual type thing. Okay. And he was invited. And of course the house cleaner saw this letter and confronted the wife about it, and she's like, oh, that word, it doesn't mean what you think it means, it's not a bad word and all this. And like, okay, dude. So that was a little bit of a curious story I heard. I don't know if it's true or not, but it is interesting. Okay, but what's getting over to what the recent news is regarding Rick Joyner. He installed this man as a minister over his church, Chris Reed, and now there's this huge lawsuit. Now this lawsuit is let me show you this. Okay, I'll just show it to you because I can't even say half this stuff. All right, so Rick Joyner is part of Morningstar Ministries. This guy named Chris Reed that he installed over his church is part of Morningstar Ministries, accused of a cover up in a lawsuit detailing this. I'm not going to read it. Doing a lot of course bad things. All right, you get the idea. Of some sort of volunteer was doing these things at their church, right? Now, it's always interesting how so many of these ministers have these things happening all the time. All these guys at the top, they seem to have never-ending like scandals and things like this. There's a reason for this. This is all, I believe, the devil's design. Look at the name of the ministry. This name here, I thought this is rather curious. Morning Star, which refers to either the King of Kings or Lucifer, depending on who you're asking. And like I said, we have this there's also some other stuff I've seen, people that were actually part of Morningstar Ministries coming out saying some interesting stuff as well. I don't want to get into all of it here, okay? But needless to say, there's a lot of suspect stuff. Like she was saying that they were actually in a trance, and she noticed everybody's in a trance at one of their services, saying some weird stuff. And I don't even want to say all of it, but it was really not good. Okay. I don't know. Okay. Those are all speculation. The only thing I can really point to that's actual evidence is this here. And also where they have the retreats is in a very interesting place among all the rich, of course, families at, of course, the top. Why would he be retreating there of all places, right? That's really strange. But getting into more, and this is on the charismatic side, right? But then you got the cessation side, the Calvinist side, John MacArthur of all people. I can show you some stuff on him. Yeah. John MacArthur's relatives, a grandfather and uncle, both 33rd, degree. Okay, this is what I'm basically referring to right here, my friends. As you can read on the screen there, his certain heritage right there. Multiple people in his past, all 33rd, degree, if you understand what I'm referring to. Of course, he says he denies he's part about it. He doesn't have anything to do with any of that stuff, he says. That's what he says. But you know what's really interesting about that? He does have a camp that he put on for students of his church called Regeneration Youth Camp. And it's very interesting because it actually... So, okay, going back to this whole thing right here. Where'd it go? This whole heritage, this word here that I'm not going to read. So he's part Scottish, his ancestry. So they would be Scottish, free, blah, blah, blah. You know the word, I'm not going to say it. So interestingly, the Scottish were also, the Druids were actually from Scotland, okay? And he would put on this youth camp exactly during the same time frame as the Druid Festival. The exact same time frame. And that's not it. There's actually a lot more. They would also do things that are very much exactly related. Not just the face painting, and actually, you could say, well, that doesn't mean anything, face painting, whatever, right? That's actually one of the things they do at the Druid Festival. But that's not it. See, here's the Druid Festival doing face painting. That's not it. Actually, what the really important one is that they would take a pig's head. They also do the hand signs too, which are very related. But the pig's head, this right here is literally an event from the Druid Festival, and they're doing it at a John MacArthur youth camp on the day of the Druid Festival. And again, it's Scottish based, and John MacArthur's Scottish, and he has family that were part of that. But for some reason, he's not a part of it, my friends. Yet he's doing all the stuff that is a part of it. And no one knows this. So, go figure. I guess it's just a weird coincidence, right? Like all the other ones. But you get the idea. So my point is that you have these ministers. They're both showing who they really are. Here's an example of John MacArthur saying something rather curious. Let's play this. This has to do with him saying that he did not die, of course, for all the sins in, the world.
If it is an actual atonement, it was an actual atonement only for those who believe, and those who believe are the elect. Okay? You don't want to turn the atonement into a potential atonement.
So he didn't die for, of course, everyone, just only certain people, according to John. See how that works? When it actually says the opposite in Scripture. All right, so that's just another example of something he said. But I already talked about Crawley and how he came from the exact group, Plymouth Brethren, that was created by John Darby. And John Darby, of course, got his money from the Wrath of course Childs. So that's where that whole trail of cessationism and Calvinism all came from. It's from them. And no one seems to know that. Now, what's interesting is if you go to John Dee was from the 1500s, as I mentioned, late 1500s. This man was essentially a magi, like you saw that went and visited the King of Kings at his birth. You had the magi, right? The magicians. So he was also a magician. He's a mathematician, an astronomer, extremely intelligent from what I understand. Advisor to Queen Elizabeth I. And apparently was able to communicate and bring forth angels, and they would actually help him out with things. Now, a lot of people are like, oh, that's strange. Well, what's really interesting about that is there's actually a scripture here, Hebrews 1, where it says this is actually the ancient Greek. If you're looking at the Greek words, it says they are ministering spirits for service. Ministering spirits for service. Now, if you look at the ancient secular meaning of these words, it says that they were public servants. Angels are public servants, meaning they're there to serve you. Which apparently was what. Now, John Dee, of course, was considered an Enoch of his time. Now, Enoch also, on behalf of certain angels, which were fallen ones, he was trying to negotiate their judgment with God, if you read the book of Enoch. So, how was he able to communicate with those angels? Good question. He was also the most righteous man ever lived and just went right up into heaven. You remember that? But of course, he probably, from what I understand, he came back and died. He was one of the 2 olive trees, right? So that's in Revelation, because every man is appointed to die, right? Every man dies. So you had Enoch and Elijah, both were whirled up into the heavens without dying. They were brought back as the 2 olive trees, of course, because they're the only 2 that never died. And actually, that's even confirmed in an apocryphal text, which I don't want to get in. I think it was the Gospel of Bartholomew or something. It actually says their specific names, but I don't want to get into all that. So what's interesting, though, is he was of that sort of he was one of those rare people that could do these things, like Enoch, right? Or like the Magi that visited the King of Kings at his birth. Now, like I mentioned, they cut this understanding off from the church. The Vatican condemned it. The Vatican condemned it because they couldn't control it. Even though the Pope liked this man actually initially, and actually had him consulted with him and asked him to help him out and advise him and stuff like that. The fact is, eventually the Vatican didn't like it because they couldn't control it. And it's just like when the King of Kings walked the earth, who was the main problem for him? It was the religious leaders, the Pharisees, that wanted to get rid of him, right? Same exact thing. So the church cut off this understanding of magic for the church. Then the devil siphoned that knowledge over to the occult via Crowley. And again, the Crowley is from the Plymouth, his mother was a Plymouth Brethren. And you can see how the devil orchestrated all this stuff. Now, even today, the Vatican is cracking down on miracles. You saw that as well. So you see what I'm getting at. This is really interesting that these stories from the ancient times of wizards like Merlin, the magician, he also was one of these type of people as well. He was able to, he was a magician of sorts, and he was also a believer. He was baptized into the church, all that kind of stuff. So it's just amazing seeing how all this stuff has went to the wayside. You can see also with our culture. If you look at King Arthur's Code of Chivalry. Now, Merlin the Magician is the one who actually orchestrated King Arthur's birth and taught King Arthur and brought him to be a great king. And he taught King Arthur about chivalry. Chivalry is a set of standards that govern actions of knights. Now, these are actually really interesting. We don't see this as much today. Mercy. Knights should show mercy to those who ask for it and avoid being cruel. Fighting. Knights should fight for good causes, such as God or country, and avoid fighting for love or worldly goods. Protecting women. Knights should protect women, widows, and gentlewomen from harm, and never, etc., etc. Duty. Knights should uphold their duty to God, church, and the liege lord. Honesty. Knights should always speak truth. Perseverance. Knights should persevere in any endeavor they start. So you see this chivalry has also went to the wayside. You've seen how much Great Britain has changed. And again, bringing it back to what I mentioned at the beginning, you have here Richard Dawkins, who's essentially destroyed this cultural faith that was in his country, yet now he regrets it. He thought he was going to get some sort of Star Trek, we all pursue science and are awesome and stuff like this. And instead, he sees his own country, of course, falling to the wayside. And now he's sort of a contradictory figure, saying he's a cultural believer, yet he's not a true believer or something like that. At any rate, you get the idea. At any rate, that's my video. I'm kind of what some of you guys think. Let me know in the comment section below, and thanks for watching.